Hello, and this is the follow-up for yesterday. You need to know how devastating this detachment can be, but you also need to know what to expect from the damage output. Now, with More Dakka, which is the new orc hotness, which everyone is having a meltdown about on the internet, people are saying it's the most damaging army in the entire game. Its points are ludicrous, all these things. Well, if you saw yesterday, I taught everyone how to play into the army. If you follow those steps, you're going to be okay. There are, of course, going to be some matchups that are just screwed, but hey, that is the world of 40k. There are always going to be better matchups and worse matchups for every single army in the game. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the actual mathematics on how the damage works in the army. And all of the charts that I'm going to show you, these have all been done, and they're done in the exact program that we taught with my buddy Sveinung a long time ago, and I'll link that video in the description. If you want access to these sheets yourself so you can have them and you don't want to fill it out yourself, then it is currently linked in the members section of the Discord in the Orks faction tab. So if you are not a paying member, you can become a paying member and then you can have them all. Otherwise, we have given all the information and we have linked the actual underlying sheets so that you can just go fill them out yourself. And with that, let's get into the damage and how we're really going to, what we're going to expect from this devastating detachment. So how deadly is More Dakka? Well, it is extremely deadly, and I will probably be willing to say that it potentially has some of the highest damage output in the entire game. But that is only on potential. It does require good rolling, especially when you're considering that a huge portion of the army is only hitting on 6s anyway, and they only get rerolls conditionally, and the 6s, of course, will be sustained hits too. That is a pretty big difference in hitting power. So they do require you have to roll the 6s. If you don't roll the 6s, there's basically not much they do. If you do roll the 6s, it can be completely overwhelming. One thing also that you need to consider is that damages from different stratagems, like I talked about the combo yesterday, ignoring cover, +1 AP, all this stuff, it does stack and it really does dramatically up the damage. You need to understand that only one unit can stack all of those buffs. Only one unit can do it. So if you're getting punched in the face with Dakka, you got to understand they're going to have a devastating unit and the other units are relying on luck. That doesn't mean they won't be devastating, but they are relying on luck. So you cannot play fearfully. Well, anyway, let's get right on into the data sheets. I'm going to start with the Lootas because these are, I think, the sexiest things in the detachment right now. So Lootas, yeah, they cost 100 points for 10. You're going to get 10 bodies. 8 of them are going to have the def cannons, and 2 of them are going to either have rocket launches or custom mega blastas. The def cannons, the def guns, it's 24 inches, or it's 48 inches range, rapid fire 1, and it's going to be 2 shots, so 3 if you're within rapid fire, strength 8, AP 1, damage 2. They do hit on 6s. They reroll hit rolls of 1 natively, and if you are shooting a unit on an objective, then you will get full hit rerolls. So what I've done is I've calculated the damage into several different units, targets here, and it'll show you how much damage a 100 points worth of Lootas will do. So the first line is just Lootas onto an objective in rapid fire range, okay? And we calculated these using custom mega blastas, not rocket launches. It's just because custom mega blastas are technically slightly better mathematically, although rocket launches definitely get better when you're shooting the blast and stuff. So here we go. If this unit is shooting into Hormagaunts, you're going to deal roughly 16.9 damage, which would approximately kill, because it's damage 2 each, so it's going to kill like 8 Hormagaunts. It's really not that much. If you're shooting Tempestus Ions, 12.9 damage. Aspect Warriors, 8.9. Marines, 17.3 damage, which is going to be 8.5 Marines, so it'll be 8 because it's, damage 3. For Chosen, you're going to deal 15.9 damage, so they really do well into Chosen, especially since Chosen have that damage, the flat 3. Fiends, 28 damage. Terminators, 7.2. Gravis Marines, 12.7. Okay, so you get it. Nemesis Dread Knights, 8.9. So basically, the damage is actually pretty good profile into everything, all the way down to the point where 100-point units of Luta will probably deal like 5 damage to a Rogue Ludoran, which really is not bad. Now, this is assuming no cover. If you have cover, it's way less. So, and remember, in 10th edition, pretty much everything's going to have cover. So it's going to be actually way less than that. So this is everything in the exactly ideal scenario. Once you add cover, I think the damage is cut in half. Then we have Lootas. In the second line here, where you see the 23.9, 19.9, all that, is going to be if you use +1 AP and ignore cover, right? So once you do that, the damage jumps up exponentially. Now, these are the 2 damage buffing strats, and you can only use these strats once each, of course, per turn, just like normal. So you can only put this on 1 Luta unit, but that Luta unit does get turbocharged. So suddenly they're doing almost 24 damage into Hormagaunts, 20 into Tempest Scions, 16 into Aspect Warriors, over 30 into Marines. So they just chew through Marine bodies, because this is suddenly, now the Marines are going to be saving on 5s, no cover. Chosen, you're going to deal like 27 damage, Fiends 28. The damage actually gets quite astronomical. It becomes crazy when you're shooting these units on an objective with full rerolls, +1 AP, and ignoring cover. In order to get the +1 AP and the ignore cover, remember, you will have to be within 18 inches and the closest enemy unit to the Lootas. So this can be countered positionally. They're going to go all the way up to 11.2 damage into a Rogal Dorn. And then finally, you can add the Shock Attack Gun Mech to them, and that's going to be the third line, where honestly the damage just gets astronomical and insane. So suddenly this unit of Lootas, which costs 100 points, and the Shock Attack Gun Mech, which goes to 175 points, is doing 15.5 damage to a Rogal Dorn, and honestly, that damage is quite ludicrous. Now let me show you what happens once we just say you're in long range and you're not on an objective, and we obviously, when you're in long range, we can't use the strats on you. You could still ignore cover technically, but it gets complicated. So this is just 100 points of Lootas here, not on an objective, and you're in long range. Suddenly now you're only dealing 5 damage to Hormagaunts, you're dealing 2.6 into Aspect Warriors, 5 damage to Marines, you're dealing 1 damage to a Rogal Dorn. This is the whole story here, guys. The damage output, and I want you to see the stark contrast of max buffs towards no buffs. This army thrives on stacking their buffs. Only 1 unit will be able to stack the buffs with the ignore cover and the +1 AP. And Lootas are useless if they're not shooting units that are on objectives. If you're not on an objective, you're gonna be freaking fine from the Lootas. Look at this crazy difference in the amount of damage output. This is really important to understand. You're dealing half a damage to the Silent King. You're dealing 1 damage to a Satan. You're dealing 1 damage to a Vindicator with 100 points of Lootas. They are not threatening at all unless you are on the objective in rapid fire range. And then suddenly it can be a little bit threatening to some things. And then once you start adding the buffs and the character to the unit, it can get scary. But if you're not on an objective, if you don't have buffs, there's basically nothing to it. And even if you do have the buffs, as long as you're not on the objective and they can't fish for the sustained hits too, the damage is honestly nothing to be really frightened of. So basically what I want to tell you is that if you're playing into this army, you need to make sure that if you have to eat Lootas to the face, you eat them off of the objectives. You put things on the objectives that they don't really want to be shooting in, like just your transport or just crap, and you put your things that you don't want them to be able to stack all these buffs on, not on the objectives. It really is that simple, and if you don't do it though, you're going to get tabled very quickly, so you have to play this way. Now I want to show you just another part of the Lootas, and this is really important. So this is the PPP value. So this is basically what this is showing. It is showing how many points does the unit need, how many activations does it take for the unit to make their points back. So if I have 100 points of Lootas and I deal 100 points worth of damage to a Rogal Dorn, or like whatever, like a slightly under half of its damage, that would be a PPP of 1.0. If I am 100 points of Lootas and I deal 150 points worth of damage to, or let's say I deal 200 points worth of damage to a whatever unit out of 100 points worth of Lootas, that would be a PPP of 0.5. If I deal 50 points worth of damage, that would be a PPP of 1.5. So we're understanding now. All right, cool. So let's look at the math here. So anything that is 1.0 or less is real good. So when you're on Lootas, we have Lootas and they're on shooting a unit onto the objective with rapid fire. They're 0.9 in Hormagaunts, 0.8 into Tempest Scions, 0.7 to Aspect Warriors. So they're really good into infantry when you're standing on an objective and you're not in cover. Once again, if you have cover, these numbers go down very dramatically. They're 1.1 into Wave Serpents. That doesn't mean they kill a Wave Serpent in a single activation, mind you. And you can see that in the damage. So they deal like 10 damage into a Wave Serpent. What that means is they deal at least 100 points worth of damage to the Wave Serpent in one activation. A DDA, 0.7. A War Dog, 1 point. And a Ballistas, 1.8. And a Silent King, 2.0. So basically, they're not very efficient to the Silent Kings. Now, when we stack these strats on them, you give them +1 to AP, +1 and ignore cover, and they're on an objective, suddenly these numbers go through the absolute roof. They're more than doubling their points value of output into a lot of these freaking units. These 0.4, 0.5, this is an astronomical damage number. A 0.3 into a Nemesis Dread Knight, I don't think I've ever seen a 0.3 for any unit in the game. So if they're stacking their buffs and you're staying on objective, you're basically going to be in for a really bad time, and the Lootas are an unreasonable freaking value. Now remember, you can only use these two strats on one of the units, which means that this is only going to be one activation. So you're not eating an entire army worth of this value. And then lastly, when we add the shock attack gun, actually the value tends to go down a little bit because the points increase. Now, once we have Lootas with not on the objective, long range again, so we already saw the difference in the damage profiles, the value actually goes terrible. So suddenly they have actually really bad value. So as long as you're not standing on an objective, Lootas really have very little value to the army, because you can see it's going to take 6.4 turns of activations in order to get 100 points of damage, 100 points worth of damage to a Rhino from Lootas, which is kind of insane. If you're going to try to deal 100 points of damage to the Silent King with 100 points with their Lootas, it's going to take you 12 activations to do it. It's absolutely atrocious, and it makes them terrible models unless you're standing on the objective and you're within rapid fire range. So just basically, what is the lesson? It's okay to get shot by Lootas. You don't care about getting shot by Lootas. Just don't stand on the freaking objective. If you stand on the objective, you're going to have a bad time. If you're not, honestly, you probably just don't care. All right, let's look at tank buses, because tank buses are a little bit different as well. So this is damage, and we'll go through the points efficiency on the next screen. So basically, the way we've done it here is this first line, I have just base, and the second line, I have pulse rockets. And I blanked out the damage into the vehicles here without the pulse rockets, because the way I had to calculate the math is I only added in the +1 to hit and wound for the vehicles. I didn't add it into the top, so that's why it looks a little bit funky. So yes, the math can be a little bit different when you activate your pulse rockets. You can deal more damage into some of these squads, but just right off the bat, you're going to deal 9 damage to Hormagaunts. You're going to deal 7 damage to Tempestus Scions. You're going to deal 4 to Aspect Warriors, 8 to Marines, 12.5 into Chosen. So you're going to kill like 4 Chosen. So they actually are pretty good into Chosen, but once again, don't let your Chosen get shot by tank buses, man. Be in your Rhino or hidden. It'd be silly to let your flat 3 wound damage things get shot by Chosen, or get shot by flat 3 damage guns. Gravis Marine 6.7, Possessed 13.3. Do not let tank buses shoot your Possessed. And then when we activate our once per game pulse rockets, they do 10 damage to a Nemesis Dread Knight, almost 14 damage to a Rhino, 11 damage to a Wave Serpent, 10 to a DDA, 11 to a War Dog, 8 to a Ballistus, 5 to the Silent King, 2.8 to the Satan, 6 to a Vindicator, and 6.3 to a Rogodorn. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us is that a base unit of tank busters does not kill the vehicles that they shoot. That's what it tells you right here, because a DDA has more than 10 wounds. A War Dog has more than 11 wounds. A Ballistus has more than 8 wounds. So if you have a unit of tank buses and they activate their once per game ability, they do not kill your tanks. It just doesn't happen. Not in a single activation. So they're going to have to stack buffs. So this is it when we put all the buffs and we put this shock attack gun. This is what the damage goes into. It goes to like 16 damage to Hormagaunts, 13 into Tempestus Scions, 8 into Aspect Warriors, 16 to Marines. But what I really want to look at is what does it do to vehicles. Suddenly, it's actually amazing to Chosen, amazing to your flat 3 wound infantry. But when we really look into the actual vehicles here, Nemesis Dread Knight 16. So you one top the Nemesis Dread Knight. But what you have to understand is when you add the shock attack gun to this unit, it is a 210 point unit. So should a 210 point unit be able to one shot a 210 point unit if it's efficient? Seems reasonable. Rhino 20 damage, crazy. Wave Serpent 18 damage, crazy. DDA 16 damage. So you're one tapping with DDAs. You're one tapping War Dogs. You're one tapping Ballistus. You're certainly not one. Sorry, Ballistus actually lives. Silent King takes 6 damage. You don't care. Satan takes 5 damage. You don't care. Vindicator probably dies because we go to 10.9. So you don't want to risk that. And the Rogodorn takes 10.9. So they're not one tapping Rogodorns. They're getting close to one tapping Vindicators. But your lighter vehicles, they are one tapping when they're led by the shock attack gun. So if you need to know like how much damage can you take, like how much can you risk, well, if they're with a shock attack gun, unless you're like one of the tougher vehicles such as the Dorn, the Silent King, those types of things, they're probably able to threaten you once per game. If there is no shock attack gun, you're probably fine as a tank. That's just the way it is. Now, of course, dice can spike. If they can roll 6s, it is what it is. But that's how you kind of have to think about these things. Now, let me show you the efficiency for the tank buses. So this is the efficiency. Line 2 is going to be with shock attack gun. Line 1 is going to be without the shock attack gun. Or I'm sorry, line 2 is with the pulse rockets. Line 1 is without the pulse rockets. So their efficiency into, say, Aspect Warriors 2.0, so it would take them roughly 2 activations to kill their own points value worth of Aspect Warriors, 2 to do Marines, a little over 1 to kill their points value worth of chosen, which means that they're efficient to chosen, but not. It's actually not psycho. Terminators 1.7 or so, possess 1.3. Yeah, it is what it is. Then we start looking at the vehicles. So they deal about approximately 135 points worth of damage into Nemesis Dread Knights when they activate their pulse rockets, and they cost 135 points. That doesn't mean they kill the Nemesis Dread Knight. It means that's how much damage they do to it. It takes them. They don't one tap a Rhino. Or so they won't one tap the Wave Serpent. They maybe one tap the DDA, but it's getting close. They still don't quite kill their points value in the DDA, so they're not one tapping it. 1.4 for a War Dog, so they're not one tapping it. Ballistus, it takes them 2 turns of activation to get their points value into Ballistus. That means it's going to take them 2 turns just to get 135 points worth of damage on a Ballistus, which is close to tapping it, right? Because it's like 140 points now. The Silent King 2.0, it's going to take them 2 turns just to get 135 points worth of Silent King, Satan, Vindicator, Rogodorn. So they're really not as good into your battle tanks as you might think they are. They are very good when you add the shock attack gun to them. Then it's actually quite scary. Then we'll talk about the Flash Gitz damage as well. Flash Gitz damage is actually shockingly good into most things here. It's actually very, very surprising to me. I didn't expect to see these numbers like this. So when we calculated this, I calculated all when they were activating their once per game lethals. And remember, all of these stats are without cover. Once you add cover, it is a completely different game. Hormagaunts, they do 15 damage. Tempestuous Scions 11, Marines, blah, 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 blah. And that's basically all of it. So when we look at the bottom, this is when we stack the damage, right? So we're going +1 AP and we're ignoring cover. So this is, I'm still calculating as closest, so you're still 4 shots into it. So the damage gets actually really astronomical. So a unit of 10 Flash Gitz here, one taps the Rhino. A unit of 10 Flash Gitz will basically one taps the Nemesis Dread Knight. About to sneeze. Excuse me. Headphones, sorry guys. And then you might one tap the DDA, you might one tap the War Dog. The Ballistus, it's getting really close. Silent King, you're dealing 6 damage to him. He just doesn't care. The Satan, just don't care. Vindicator, probably kill a Vindicator. Rogodorn, you deal 10 damage to it. That's a lot. That is a lot of damage. So the Flash Gitz, this is a 10-man. Mind you, this is not a 5-man. That's a lot of damage that they put out there. And then we look at the PPP, which is the trade value. So like how many turns of activations does it take to earn their points back into it? The numbers are actually quite good on pretty much everything. If you look at them, you're only really bad into Terminators, Ballistus, Silent King, and the Rogodorn. And once you activate the +1 AP and the ignore cover strats on them, suddenly you're basically really good into everything. You have great numbers. So basically, here's the takeaway I want you to have is that Dakka, or More Dakka, is going to deal crazy damage into the unit they need to deal crazy damage into. But they don't have that when they spread out. And a lot of it is under your control as the player. Do not stand on objectives if you don't want to get shot by Lootas. If you don't care about getting shot by Lootas, because let's say it's just a transport or something, feel for it. You don't care. But do not allow Lootas to shoot you when you're on the objective. If they're shooting you off the objective, they're practically useless. If they're shooting you on the objective, they're unreasonably powerful. Flash Gitz actually are just very good in this detachment. And then your tank buses don't deal the damage you might think they deal. Actually, as a matter of fact, a lot of times they're more threatening to your elite infantry than they are your big vehicles. But they do deal damage to the vehicles, and when they're stacked with the shock attack gun, giving them the reroll hit rolls of 1, it gives them an increased opportunity to spike. So guys, here's the damage. This is what it looks like. The damage is really, really good when they spike their rolls, and it's amazing when they can stack their buffs. When they're not stacking buffs, damage gets a lot less. So take that for what you will. For me personally, I'm not playing More Dakka. I don't think More Dakka is honestly all that good. I do see crazy damage from it, but I see a lot of counterplay as well. I'm sticking with Warhorde. That doesn't mean More Dakka isn't good. It totally is good. But like I said in my video yesterday, if you can counter the Zodgrod issue, the Zodgrod rush, I do believe that is by far and away the most powerful part of the detachment. If you can counter it, I think you'll be okay into More Dakka. As long as you're smart and you position well, do not let your guys get self-hit by these freaking Lootas. These numbers are unreasonable. So just really, really be careful with that. You definitely want to get shot by the bottom layer of Lootas, not the top layer of Lootas, because the bottom is when you're not on an objective and they're not being able to stack their buffs. So definitely err towards that side if you take my mean. So with that, guys, this is the damage for the More Dakka detachment. It's pretty scary. It is a lot, but there is a lot of counterplay. So if you go check out my video from yesterday, I'll try to link it down below so that you can see exactly how it works. If you like these data sheets, you can get access to this exact sheets that I've already filled out for you, and it is linked in the Orks section of the members Discord. That's the way that you access the members Discord, is you pay a membership fee by either becoming a YouTube member or a Ko-Fi member, and then you're supporting the channel so I can bring you more awesome content and help you beat the orcs when the orcs are terrifying even more often. So with that, guys, I'm going to take off, and I appreciate all of you, and I hope you have a great day. Crump on. Bye-bye.